We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chov Daled, this volume 24, the third Sicha for the Parshas Devarim. The Rebbe teaches the words in the Parsha. It says Kol Chevel Argoiv. It means the whole district of Argoiv. What exactly Argoiv means, whether it means a palace or he brings from his father, from Likutei Levi Yitzchok, that Argoiv means the oil. And the Rebbe goes away to explain the two levels of oil, of bittel, and the difference between yayin and oil. And in the end of the Sikha, also the difference of learning Torah with akoch, with fervor, or learning Torah in a way of bittel, and how they both coincide, and how the Rebbe connects it to a statement of the Mishnah that they forgot what this room in the four edges of, there were rooms, the four edges of the Ezras Noshim, and one was the Lishkas Yayin V'Shemen, as the Rebbe will explain later on, and why the first, in the beginning, the Rebbe explains why it says that, what's the meaning that the oil that was brought for the menorah. So you had the first level of oil, and then you had also the second level was from Regev Ever Yardin. As we will see all the details in the Sikha, we'll go step by step. So first, the Rebbe brings down the taich of the posik of Chevel Argoiv, that in Pashtus Argoiv means a palace. Chevel means the district, that the whole district was called Argoiv. The Chevel Argoiv in the kingdom of Oig in the Bashan. So there was a district there called Argoiv. So there is the Pashto Pshat that Argoiv means a palace, because the palace, the whole area got the name of Argoiv. Argoiv means a palace. And he brings down from his father, from Levi Yitzchok, that the word Argoiv comes from the word Regev that we find in the Mishnah. And Argoiv with an extra aleph, as the Rebbe points, is not such a problem. So it's really Regev. And it has to do with the oil that was there, a quality of oil, a chevel argoiv, a district in which there was oil, as we will see as inside now. Aleph, in der Heintiker Sedre, Werder erzählt, in today's portion, it is the Sedre, it is related with the Bnei Yisrael haben menatzeach given, as the Jewish people, they were victorious. Oig melech haboshan v'es kol amei. Oig, the king of Bashan and all of his people, the whole nation. And then Moshe Rabbeinu is recounting that Vanilkoid es kol orav, we captured all of his cities. And then it says kol chevel Argoiv, the whole district of Argoiv, which was Mamleches Oig Baboshan, the kingdom of Oig in the Bashan. So they also took all the cities and the whole district of Argoiv. What exactly means Argoiv? Benegeya to Chevel Argoiv, as far as the district of Argoiv, gefindt men zwei inyonim, we find two ideas, which point to the importance of the place. What was the district of Argoiv? What does it mean? What is the specialty, and why is it called Argoiv? So Aleph, Rashi teacht Leuten Targum. Rashi translates according to the Targum as Argoiv meint Paltin, that Argoiv means palace. Heichal Melech, that means the palace of the king. Und dem ganzen Pelach, that whole district, the Chevel Argoiv hat men gerufen al Shem funem Heichal HaMelech. They called it on the name because of the palace of the king. It was called the district of Argoiv. That's one pshat, that's Rashi's pshat. The Rebbe brings down from a Mishnah and the way his father teaches that Mishnah. The Mishnah zogt, the Mishnah says, over there it's talking about where is the best place to get the oil for the menorah. So the Mishnah Menocha says that Takua, the place Takua, is Alpha L'Shemen. That's the number one. The best oil comes from Takua. So which means there's Shemen from Shtot Takua, the oil that comes from the city of Takua, is Rishon Muvchar Lishmanim. That's the first, and it's the choicest for the oils for the Beis Hamikdash. For the oils that we use for the Beis Hamikdash, best is come from Takua. All the oils that are used in the Beis Hamikdash. And then the Gemara brings another opinion. The Gemara brings the opinion of Abba Shaul Omer. What does Abba Shaul say? He says, while Takua is the first, he doesn't disagree, but he says the second one after Takua is Regev Be'ever HaYarden. It's the place, Regev, on the other side of the Yarden. Which is this Regev? We don't know of a place called Regev in Ever HaYarden. So the Rebbe's father teaches that this Regev is the Argev, called Chevel Argev. And the Tate Mefar is the Tate Mefarish. So my father, the Rebbe says, explains, as the Regev who Chevel Argev, that the Regev that it mentions in the Mishnah, that is the district of Argev that is mentioned in the Pasuk. That was the portion of Menashe, because the Chatzi Shevet HaMenashe got the portion of Boshon, the Chevel Argev. Commission Kosu beParshas Devarim, as written in the Parshas Devarim. So the Argev over here is the Regev, and the Regev was the place where they bought the oil. So according to this shot, the Argev is the Chashivas, the importance of the place is the oil. It had good oil over there. And according to the Rashi's shot, the Pashtim shot, it was the place of the palace of the king. And the Rebbe first that brings down, that's why it says who got it. It was taken by Yoir ben Menashe. And Yoir is the level of oil which is light, and light comes from oil. On their meat is their mevair. And my father, the Rebbe's father, explains with this that this is the place is Argev. Why is it that the inner reason for was Yoir ben Menashe lokachas kol chevel Argev? Why is it Yoir ben Menashe who took the whole district of Argev? And he explains, Val Yoir hu meloshin oir. Yoir comes from the language of light. The oil nimshach mishemen, and light comes from oil. So we said now Regev is Argev, and Regev is the oil that the Mishnah says there, and that's where Yoir comes. So he shined from the Shemen. All right, that's what the Rebbe's father says. So the Rebbe is going to explain now the Penimis and Yonim, this whole idea that the city, the Chevel Argev, is associated with being the palace of the king. It's associated with the oil, and there has to be a connection between these two perushim. Yeder inyan in Torah is meduyik betachlis. Every aspect of Torah is totally precise, exact. Darf man sagen, we need to say, as die zwei inyonei chashibus, was werden erzählt in Torah, that these two matters of importance that are related in Torah about the same place, in Torah, we have the two interpretations. Chevel Argev. So what do we translate it? The two interpretations. Number one, Aleph, Ados is verbunden mit Heichal HaMelech, that's associated with the palace of the king. Und Beis, Ados is Shnielo, and second, that this is secondary to the oil that comes from Takua. If nemen von dort Shemen LeMikdash, to take for their oil for the Mikdash. Haben zwischen sich a Sheiches in Teuchen have a meaning connection between these two interpretations. There's some connection between them. And the Rebbe will go out to explain the whole idea of Shemen and what it means, Shemen from Argoy, from Regev, and how there is a difference between Shemen from Tekoa and Shemen of Regev, as the Rebbe will explain. But first, the Rebbe wants to clarify that there is actually a disagreement in the Mishnah. One can read the Mishnah and say, well, Tekoa, the Mishnah Menachos that the Rebbe brought down, that Tekoa is number one, and the Regev is number two. That was actually said by Abba Shaul, but maybe Abba Shaul isn't disagreeing with the Tanakama, meaning that he also agrees with the Tanakama that the first is Tekoa. He says secondary to it is Regev, and maybe the Tanakama will also agree with Abba Shaul that this is also, so there's no disagreement over here whether secondary to Tekoa is Rogav. You could say that, but the Rebbe says no. The language in the Mishnah, it's mashma, as the Rebbe will say now, that there is a difference of opinions over here. According to the Tanakama, only Tekoa, Regev is not second to Tekoa. And according to Abba Shaul, Regev is secondary to Tekoa. So that means that there is a disagreement over here. And the Rebbe is going to explain why is there a disagreement. But first, the Rebbe wants to set straight that there is a disagreement over here. So the Rebbe says, base, Vetman das verstehen, we will understand it from dem Biur in dem Inyan as Shnia lo Regev Eiver Hayardin, about explaining the idea, what it means that second to the oil of Tekoa, Shnia lo, is Regev Eiver Hayardin. So the Rebbe says, from Pashtus Loshen HaMishnah, from the simple language of the Mishnah, Abba Shaul Eimer Shnia lo Chulu. So whenever there is a opinion, and then you could bring down another opinion, this one said is the Pashtus means that there's a disagreement. Is mashma, it appears, adosis aplukta, sufficient dem Tanakama mit Abba Shaul. That this is a difference, a disagreement between the Tanakama with Abba Shaul. Sider Shemen from the Regev is Shnia lo denit. Whether we can consider the oil of Regev that comes from Argev, from Regev, as a secondary to the oil of Tekoa, or according to the Tanakama, no, it's not a secondary. It's only Abba Shaul says that. And the Rebbe, that's the Loshen when you say Abba Shaul Omer, meaning that he disagrees. That's what it says. If it's not disagreeing, you say Omar Abba Shaul, but here Abba Shaul Omer means he's disagreeing with the previous Tana. And the Rebbe brings further evidence, Befrat, as euch benegeet zu soiles v'yayin from Beis Hamikdash. Also, when we're talking about the oil for the Beis Hamikdash, but we find that when we talk about the fine flour and the wine that they use for the Beis Hamikdash, that gebracht in Mishnah, it's also brought down in the Mishnah. In Menachos over there, it brings down as this is Faran Alpha and Shani Lahan, that there is the number one that you can use, the place you get the fine flour and the wine, and then there's the secondary. So we say there is one and two. Bei sie wird ausgeteicht, was die Shnia lahem seinen. And over there, so Chatchila says there's one and two, and then it translates what the two is, which is the number one, and what's the number two. Beis also Stam Mishnah, and it's a Stam Mishnah. So there's no second opinion, there's no Abba Shaul, and there's no. So in that case, when there is one and two, the Mishnah states it. So if the Tanakama holds it by the oil, there's also one and two, it wouldn't be Abba Shaul Omer, it would have been the Mishnah would say what is the number one, what is the number two. because it doesn't say it over here. And when we contrast it and compare it to what it says with regards to the fine flour and the wine, so we see clearly that over there it's brought as a Stam Mishnah, and we bring down the two levels. You can bring first, you bring it from place A, and second, you bring it from place B, and that's all part of the words of the Tanakama. But in our case, it's Abba Shaul coming up with the Shnia law. That means that the Tanakama disagrees. So the question is, why? And we need to understand this in Primius Henyonim, where the Rebbe is going to explain, why is it whether the oil of Regev, of Eber Ayardin, why is it that there is a dispute here? There's a question whether it's secondary, whether it is good enough for the use of the Beis Hamikdash, according to the Tanakama, no, and according to Abba Shaul, yes. So that ben verstehen. So once we establish that this is a machlokes between the Tanakama and Abba Shaul, whether the oil of Regev is secondary, so we need to understand in vos basteit de plukta. So what does consist? What is the argument between the Tanakama and Abba Shaul, between the Tanakama and Abba Shaul? Why, according to the Tanakama, he does not want to consider the Regev as secondary, and why, according to Abba Shaul, it is good enough as a secondary to the oil from Takua? What's the behind it? Well, generally speaking, we don't usually say facts. We can't have a machlokes. If the oil was decent in the Regev, that according to the Abba Shaul, it could be used as secondary, why would the Tanakama reject it? How could there be an argument in fact, a factual disagreement, whether it is a chosen oil or not? How could you argue about that? So the Rebbe is going to explain here the whole Inyan of Chassidus, what is oil from Eretz Yisrael, what is oil from Eber HaYarden. But the key, the Rebbe says, why does he mention, you see, that Abba Shaul says Regev, and he says clearly Eber HaYarden. Why does he have to mention where it was in Eber HaYarden? That's the key of telling us why the Regev is secondary, and why, according to the Tanakama, Yitaka cannot use that. That this is explained in Dembos Abba Shaul is Moisiv, the fact that Abba Shaul adds Umefaret, and he specifies Regev be'even hayardin. He says on the other side of the Yarden. But the meat is at Oisen, so what he's intending here is not just to tell you where Regev is. Nit nor zu mitzayin zayin. Not just to point out which Regev he means, nor to bavoren and them chidush abazeh, but he is coming to caution the novelty. What's special that even though it's Ever Hayarden, the Regev Ever Hayarden, which makes it what Abba Shaul says. Yes, it's Ever Hayarden, Regev Ever Hayarden. It's a novelty, and still you can use it. Tanakama doesn't want to use Ever Hayarden. Der Tam von Tanem Kamo, also von Shemen von Regev, is nit masim zu sagen Shniela. He says that on the oil that comes from Regev, it's not fitting. We can't even say secondary to Takua, which means if it's secondary means as that is Koriv Liyas Meshubach zum Shemen von Takua Sheberetz Yisrael, that he's close, he's near, he's similar, he's almost as praiseworthy, as special as the oil that comes from Takua Eretz Yisrael. The key is because it's Be'eber Hayardin. It's on the other side. It's not in Eretz Yisrael. Is Val Regev is in Eber Hayardin Kittel Kamon. It's in the other side of the Yarden. I'll say later on. Und das Bavorunt Abba Shaul, and this is what Abba Shaul is coming to tell us. No, it's Eber Hayardin, but yet Regev Eber Hayardin is okay. As Afal Pi as Regev is Eber Hayardin. That although Regev is on the other side of the Jordan, Afa became halter, yet he holds as the shemen from Regev is shniolo, that this oil of Regev is secondary. It's not the same as Takua, but it's still secondary. So he's trying to mention that he mentions when he says Regev Evra Yardin. Yeah, I know it's Evra Yardin, but that still can be shniolo, which is the reason that the first Manda Omer, the Tanakama, does not consider it is because it is not even shniolo, just because it comes from Eimer Ayardin. What's the explanation Apia Chassidus, as Rebbe will explain? The whole idea of oil, that we bring oil represents self-effacement. It represents bittul. Matter of fact, within bittul, it represents bittul b'mitzias. Oil burns quietly as opposed to wood makes noise. Oil gets totally consumed when it's pulled to the wick. Oil represents full level of bittul. Full level of bittul cannot come. The person who is an entity cannot himself make himself a non-entity, to make himself to self-efface that he does not exist if he isn't existent by himself. That's, you start with your mitzias. That's you are. So how do you make yourself not a mitzias? That can only come milmailo. The Eibishter gives you that koyak to become a bittul b'mitzias to the Eibishter. But that can come only basically in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, where the eyes of Hashem, the Eibishter is always there, the Eibishter can pull you out and make you into feeling that you're not a Metzias. Whether that oil can come from Eiver Hayardin, which doesn't have the presence of Hashem, as the Rebbe will explain, that the Eretz Yisrael is inherently belongs to you. The Eibishter has the Eiver Hayardin is something that we added through the Bakosha. They asked to give them the land, but it doesn't have that level of Eine Hashem, the level of the presence of Hashem. According to the Tanakama, you cannot bring oil from there. You cannot be Bittul Mitzias from Eiver Hayardin. But Abashol says it's enough, because at the end of the day, while it came through the Yidden, through the Bakosha of Shevet Reuven, God, Shevet Menashe, they asked for it, but who gave it them? The Eibishter. So it does have, while it's not at the same level as Eretz Yisrael, but yet it has, and it could accomplish the level of bit. Let's look inside. Gimel, the Bir in them al derech Chassidus. They're explaining this in the style of Chassidus. As is Yedua, it is known as Shemen is Meramis of Bittel. Shemen hints on self-effacement, Bittel, self-negation. Vimenzetas in Shemen Begashmis, as you can see by the oil physically. As es wird gemacht durch, first it's made through Ktishas Hazayis, you crush the olive, and as the Pasuk says, Kosis Lamoir, you crush it to bring it to the Moir, to the luminary, to light. Beshas Metzitas on, and at the time that you light it, the oil is drawn after the wick, and everything is consumed, everything is burnt. Nothing left of it. This is the language of the Torah from the Alter Rebbe. Nothing remains from the oil. And also the way it burns is bachashoi, is silently, on the rash, without noise. Was das als weiß the bittel betachlis. This all points to total self-effacement, total self-negation. Was bittel hametzias, which is negating from being a metzias, or not being an entity by yourself. To der darge from bittel bemetzias. So this is a very high level. To reach the level of shemen, to be bottle b'metzias, which is a bittul mekoil v'koil, a total bittul from all in all, total self-negate. The dugma v'der shemen v'ert nichla legamri. Similar to oil, which is totally consumed, you should be totally consumed, a non-entity. A person cannot reach that with his own strength, with own powers. Through the person's service, his meditation, reflection in the greatness of Hashem, and the lowness of the person, you can think about it. You cannot really reach it on your own from yourself. It can't come that little. Because it doesn't matter how much a person negates himself, it's still defined as negating the entity. He is subduing himself, and he negates his entity, his sense of self, because of Hashem. So you are doing this, and you are subjugating yourself, and you are causing yourself, your feeling of selves to be non-existent before the Eibishter. But you still remain. You are an entity, and you remain an entity by yourself. Sein Metzias can it bring into Bitla Metzias. Your existence cannot lead you to non-Metzias, because you start with your Metzias. So therefore, you're always going to be a Metzias. How could you really reach to the level of oil of Bitla Metzias that it's nichle and ganz and that it's totally consumed? That inyan from Bitla Metzias kum davke the Chagilu Milmaila. This comes specifically through a revelation of above. B'shas beim Odon vert nisgale an oireliki. When by the person is revealed a godly light, umitzad dem oibersten idoch nitokin ort verkein mitzias zulosich has b'sholem. From the Eibishter's perspective, there is nothing for no entity. So there is really no existence besides Hashem. God forbid there's no existence. If you get that to be enlightened, you get an inspiration from the godly light. That's the way to become Bittul B'Mitzias, because Hashem, there is no Mitzias next to Hashem. Very b'derech memelin is battle the Mitzias Odom. So automatically, if you feel the godly light, the presence of Hashem by you, then you lose your Mitzias automatically. So what is the person works? What's his involvement? He can't do it. And when it's done milmaila, it just automatically the person becomes a non-mitzias. So what is the job of the person? The job of the person is to make himself a vessel to that light that it should be able to shine in him. In order for this revelation from above, should be sensed by him, and it should impact him on the person. The person needs to be a vessel to that light, this haste. That means the person, what he needs to do as the avodas odom b'shteit nor. What is the service of the person? Consists only in machem v'zicha keli zum gilu ermamayla, just to make for himself, out of himself, a vehicle, a vessel to the revelation of the light from above. But how does this negation from his existence, how does that take place? That is not accomplished, not through your work, nor through the Gilu Milmaila. It comes from revelation above. So the Rebbe qualifies, explains over here, in order to make a human being who is a Metzias into a non-Metzias, it comes only from above. That level of entity, of self-negation, or being totally lacking of your own Metzias. A Metzias cannot make himself not a Metzias, but the Eibishter, when it's revealed by you, that knocks out your Metzias. Once you let in Hashem, that your Metzias automatically leaves. But What is the job of the person? The person's job is to make himself a fitting vessel so that the light of above should be able to shine in him. But he doesn't make up the bittul. The bittul comes when the shines to the person. That negates the entity of the person. And this is the difference between Eretz Yisrael. How much light, the light Hashem that makes you bittul b'mitzias is in Eretz Yisrael. It's not in Eber Hayardin. Dalet al pizevet memfarstein dem chiluk, or not as much. That's where the disagreement between Abba Shol and Tanakama. Al pizevet memfarstein dem chiluk zwischen Eretz Yisrael and Eber Hayardin. We'll understand the difference between Eretz Yisrael and the other side of the Jordan, benegei dem shemen farm Beis Hamikdash, as it relates to the oil for the Beis Hamikdash. The chilek zwischen Eretz Yisrael and Ever Hayardin is, what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and the other side of the Jordan? Is Eretz Yisrael is the Eretz Shiva Amomim. Eretz Yisrael is the land of the 7 nations. But the Ebersterot Melachatchila Beicher given from Allah Arotzis, Hashem to begin with chose it out of all the lands of Eretz HaKodesh. It was chosen by Hashem to be the Holy Land. Amongst all other countries and lands of the world, the Eberster chose Eretz Yisrael. Unal Sazah, and as such, as a chosen holy land, he gave it to the Holy Fathers, for an eternal inheritance. Mashenken Eber Hayardin is nicht an Eretz, was is melachatchila given ausgestellt far b'nei Yisrael. But the other side of the Jordan was not a land that to begin with has been set up for the Yidden. Nor not luma'atzim. The language is they took it on by themselves, which means they asked for it, they begged for it, and they got it. So that's called not luma'atzim. They took him for themselves. The Bnei God and Bnei Reuven haben sie ausgebeten. The sons of God and Reuven, they had asked for it, and they have gotten their request. They said, let this land be given to your servants as an inheritance. And that's why, because this wasn't originally destined, it was just through their request that they got it. There is still a difference between Eretz Yisrael and Eretz and Eber Hayardin. On the far is Faran Achiluk Ikri, there is a main distinction benegei the kedusha v'ashuras hashchina, as it relates to the sanctity and the presence, the resting of the divine in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, legabe Eber Hayardin, related relative to Eber Hayardin. U'kamaymer Chazal, as the sages of blessed memory say, Bamidbar Rabbo, Eretz Canaan Mukudeshes Me'ever Hayardin. That Eretz Canaan is more sanctity, it's more holier than the other side of the Yarden. Eretz Canaan, Ksher Lebeis Shechina. Eretz Canaan is fit to have the housing of the Shechina, not Never Hayardin. The Kedusha from Eretz Yisrael is not abhängig in the Eden Vavidosim. The sanctity of Eretz Yisrael does not hinge on the Yidden and their service, nor Zikum Milmailo, it comes from above. Eretz Asher Goimer Tomid Ein Hashem Elokechabo. Constantly, always, the eyes of Hashem are in it. This is not up to the Yid. This is, anyways, Hashem is in Eretz Yisrael all the time. Hashem in the Kedusha for Eber Hayardin, as opposed to the Kedusha of the other side of the Yarden, versus Gevorna Nachlo Far Eden. How did that become an inheritance for Yidden? Durch Zeyer Bakosha, that is through their request. Is as a madrege was nivra tutoy. That's a madrege that is accomplished by the created beings. So the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Eber Hayardin is from Hashem. Eretz Yisrael is from Hashem. Eber Hayardin, the people get it, and therefore, as we'll see when we talk about real bittul that has to come milmaila, it has to be only in Eretz Yisrael, where it comes from Hashem, and not from the Yardin, which comes from the people. Hey, und das ist der Biur haplukta zwischen dem Tanakam und Abba Shol. This is the explanation of the disagreement between the Tanakama Nabashol. The Tanakama held, the first Tana's opinion is, as Shemen Mufchar can zayin nor from Eretz Yisrael. The chosen oil can be only from Eretz Yisrael. Valdavke in Eretz Yisrael, because specifically Eretz Yisrael is a lakus meir ba'ifon golus. Godliness shines in an open way. B is in an oifon from the ear to the extent that it's seeing in Eretz Yisrael. Eine Hashem Elokecha ba. Visible, the Eibishter's visible presence is visible in Eretz Yisrael. And that's why he says, that's why it's a fitting place to have the level of bittul b'metzia, to have the shemen, the oil over there. It's a fitting place. Especially the Alter Rebbe is mevayer the Mlosh. Alter Rebbe explains the language of Einei Hashem Elokecha bo. Eine means the eyes, and the Alter Rebbe explains as Einayim em kinuyim lamshochas va'oros eira chochma. Einayim are a description to bringing down on the light, shining the light of chochma. Was Shemen is verbunden mit chochma. Oil is associated with chochma. The Chazal Sogan sages tell us but that they use a lot of shemen zayis. That's why they have chokhmah, the Gemara Menachos. So that means that shemen has a connection with chokhmah. So Eine Hashem Elokecha ba, we're saying, where could you have shemen? Where could you have bittul? In Eretz Yisrael, because bittul is associated with the Eine Hashem Elokecha ba, because it has to come bittul milmaylo, and the Eine Hashem Elokecha ba means that there's the level of chokhmah, and the level of chokhmah is the level of shemen. As of the Yesh Loimar, and the Rebbe says, in addition to that, as in them nomen takua, we say the nomen takua is merum as the maila from them shemen. Over there, it's also hinted the advantage of this oil. Takua means Meloshin by Yiska Machshavte B'choizek. He should stick his thought strongly. In Yonenu, what it means by us, there Yiska Machshavte B'choizek. What should he stick his mind in strongly? What should he focus and put it in his mind? In the Oirel Kivas Vet Nizgali in Eretz Yisrael, in the godly light which is revealed in Eretz Yisrael, be'oifon, and in such a way, amivert nisached mit dem Oir v'kedusha, in a way that you become united with that light and that holiness. Und der Riber is der Gilu ha'oir poil pulose, and that's why the revelation of the light does its impact to oifton inyan habitl b'shlamusa. That way, you can accomplish the level of bitl completely when you are in Eretz Yisrael and you have from above, and you have the takua, you have the chayzek to really get you to the level of bitl b'metzias. Mashenken evera yardin, as opposed to the other side of the Jordan. The Baal dort is nitod der gilui. Their gilui oira kedusha milmayla, but they don't have that level. It was something that they didn't ask for, took it on their own, but doesn't have this holiness of kedusha milmayla. Was poyo zayin dem inya from bittul amiti b'mitzi. That should impact the idea of a true subjugation from being negated for your metzias in Evra Yardin. There's no level of that kedusha there. There's no level. There's no Eine Hashem Elokecha. Der far ken der shemen for Regev Be'Evra Yardin, according to the Tanakama. The oil of the Regev Be'Evra Yardin, Nizayin Keshnila, can even be a secondary to Zayin Be'erech to shemen of Bit von Eretz Yisrael, to even be any relationship, any comparison to the oil and the Bitl of Eretz Yisrael. Says Nito in them gather from shemen, and there he doesn't have the gather of shemen. And that's why, according to the Tanakama, we can't even consider that to be secondary to Regev secondary to Tekoa, because it just doesn't have it. In Eber Yarden, we don't have that level. And the Rebbe is going to explain in Ois Vov, however, that Abba Shaul says at the end of the day, even though they didn't ask for it, but then the Eberster conceded, and he gave them, so even there can be used, as we'll see in the continuation of Ois Vov. Ois Vov. Abba Shaul oberhalt. However, Abba Shaul's view is, as der Shemen von Regev can yezayin ashniyalo. The oil coming from Regel can be a second to the oil of Tekoa. Weil af al pias di kedusha von Ever Hayardi. Although the sanctity from the other side of the Jordan kommt nit zu kedushas Eretz Yisrael atzme, does not reach the level, the sanctity of Eretz Yisrael itself. Underfar is as nit kein al volle shemen, and that's why it's not the number one for oil, the oil of Regev, even according to Abba Shaul, is secondary, but it's not the alpha because it is not at the same level of kedusha from above, which Eretz Yisrael enjoys. Is as ober oicha kedusha. But still, however, it is a kedusha v'sisacher from Nivroim, which is higher than the created being, and therefore, can therefore poil sein a bittel b'metzias, and that's why it could impact also making that the person should be subjugated entirely, his whole being. But is be'erech, it is comparison, it's secondary, but it's still comparable to bittul mikol v'kol from Eretz Yisrael, to the total bittul of Eretz Yisrael, be'oifen in a way as it is sheni Allah that is second to it, there is still a connection. How so? Because while the Yidden, the Bnei Gad, the Bnei Reuven, they asked for it, but it was then given to them by Hashem, meaning it also has that special power from above. Warum euch in Ever Hayarden? Because also in the other side of the Jordan is Nimshach geworden der Gilui Eure Milmailo. It extended the revelation of light from above. Die Kedusha von Ever Hayarden hat sich aufgetan. The sanctity of the Ever Hayarden was accomplished, not human, not they asked for it. Nit durch the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven. It's not that the Bnei Gad, Bnei Reuven made the Ever Hayardin holy. Nor durch them was der Eberster hat Maskim given. It came about through that. Hashem agreed. Und Koiveya given, and he set up as so werden zeir nachla, that it should become their inheritance. Was their meat hat dort areingegeben, when the Eberster agreed that this should be their inheritance, he put in a kedusha miyuchedes, a special sanctity. Und die Bnei Gad und Bnei Reuven, and the Bnei Gad and Reuven haben durch zeir bakoshe, through their request, they caused the Goyim given to the Hamshachas HaKedusha to bring it down the Kedusha. The Kedusha comes from the Eberster. It is only that through their request, the Eberster gave the Kedusha in there. But at the end of the day, the Kedusha came from the Eberster, a special Kedusha also into Eber Hayard. This is actually the similar meaning when we say the language that they took it on their own doesn't mean they took it on their own. The Eberster gave it to them. Took it on their own means it was through their request. Al derech vid der badait for not lum atzu. Similar to the meaning of they took it by themselves. When we say about the Eber Hayardin, but Bnei Gad Bnei Reuven, in Pashtus is simply, is nit der pshat. It doesnn't mean azehom dos genumen durch zeir bakosha, that they took it by their request. They took it. They took it on their own. Das meant what it really means as through their request. That's why they got it. But who is the one that actually gave it to them? is given abhängig in Shuvos Shel Moshe. That was dependent on what Moshe is going to respond und der Ebershter's Rotzen, what the Ebershter wants. Und das ist der Chilik zwischen Eber Hayardin und Chutz La'aretz. This is the difference between the other side of the Jordan and Chutz La'aretz. That Oich in Chutz La'aretz, but the Yid, so we have Eretz Yisrael, the Eber Hayardin get an infusion of Hashem, but also in Chutz La'aretz, a Yid could make it, but it comes b'koyach atzmai. Oich in Chutz La'aretz hot a Yid b'koyach zu oifton. A Yid has the power to accomplish, und darf oifton, and needs to accomplish, as a lokus, so dort meir sein begoli, that godliness should shine there openly. Uke pisgom Rabbi Seinu Nisienu, as the saying of our Rebbes, our leaders, mach do eretz in Chutz La'aretz Eretz Yisrael, make Eretz Yisrael here in Chutz La'aretz. The bald aber as der Gilui wird aufgetan durch dem Oden, since the Gilui is accomplished, who does it? The person, the Lashon Hanal, let's use the Lashon, mach do Eretz Yisrael, you make here Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, who does it? It's the person doing it. Is as Azamadrege, was is nicht hecher davon. It is such a step, a level, that it's not above, higher than that, was a nivra mugbal can mamshich sein, that a limited created being can, it's not higher than that, because he's the one that has to make that. Mash'enken di darges hakedusha von Ever Hayardin, as opposed to the level, a step of kedusha of the other side of the Jordan, can nit aid mamshich sein un oifton boy alein. He cannot draw it down and do this in him alone. They can nor beten und goydem sein. All what they can do is request, and they can cause as dozon nimshach vera milmayla, that this should extend from above. Bibal die Gedusche von Ever Hayardin is hecher from kennen nimshach werden durch nivroi. Since the sanctity of the other side of the Jordan is higher, and it's not able to be drawn down through creations, so that means it's higher than the people. The Riber can see in ze oifton abitul b'metzias. That's why it can accomplish by the Yidden a nullification from their existence, because this is from beyond their existence. But azoivi dos is amadrege was hot al kol ponim hashayches to nivroim. But since it's a level that has, at least it's connected to the created being, because that's why they can ask for it, because the father can say does betnun arishrufen. That's why they can ask for it, and they can bring it out al kol ponim b'derech gram, at least in a way of a cause. The riber is a snit bedoime to dem bittul b'metzias. This is not the same as the bittul b'metzias was ken sich oifton in Eretz Yisrael atzma, that can be accomplished in Eretz Yisrael itself. In high time, according to Abba Shaul, is der shemen von Regev be'ever hayardim l'shnilo, the oil that comes from the place of Regev, which is on the other side of the Yarden, only secondary because it is not the same as Eretz Yisrael, which the Kedusha from the beginning comes from Hashem. This is connected to the people, but still the people bring out a higher level. That's why, according to Abba Shaul, it is still secondary to the oil that comes from Tekoa. Zayin, apikol hanal, wird man euch verstehen, die Sheiches zwischen the zwei inyonim hanal, we understand the connection between these two ideas, aspect, Sif Aleph in teaching, whether Argoiv means the palace, or here it means the oil. Benegeya zu Chevel Argoiv. Weil die Meilem Yuchedes von dem Shemen und Bittel von der Regev. What is that special advantage of the oil and the subjugation? Oil is subjugation. From Regev is merumes in dem Pirush von Argoiv, that is hinted in the interpretation Argoiv Mloshim Paltin Heichal Melech, that Argov comes from the lotion of the palace of the king. That will explain to us that special quality of the oil and the bittel that comes from Regev. B'shas Eden seinen kodesh land, when the Yidden conquer a land, is es nit nor a kibush begashmius. It's not just a physical conquering. As the Bailus von Land geht darüber zu Eden, that the ownership of the land transferred to Eden. Nor das is ube iker a kibush beruchnis. This is and mainly a spiritual conquering. You conquer the land means that spiritually the land is transferred from Rishus to Kodesh, ha'oretz v'chol inyoneha. The land and all of its aspects gain iber l'rishus. They go over to domain goy Kodesh ha'kedusha, to the holy nation. They go over to kedusha. Balderech zeh is as benegeya to Argoiv. The same thing is as it relates to the palace, Loshen Paltin, the long palace. B'shas mehot koivish given, when they conquered Chevel Argoiv, the district of the palace, is das nishaper geworden von a Heichel Melech Basar Vadam. It turned over from being a room for the king of a human being, of flesh and blood, from the Umas Ha'olam, which was from the nations of the world, Oig Melech HaBosham. So a Heichel Melech, it turned into a king from the Emerson Melech, from the true king, Malkish Ha'olam, the king of the world. Und der Fahr is Argoiv, was is geworden, a Paltin Shel Melech. And therefore, Argoiv, that became the palace of the king for Malkish Ha'olam, Ame'ein von Klolus Eretz Yisrael. This is similar to all of Eretz Yisrael, was is Paltin Shel Melech. B'chlal, the whole of Eretz Yisrael is called the palace of the king. Here they turned the Argoiv, the palace of Oig, into a palace of the king. Umitzad dem is Oig der Shemen ubittel von dem Ort. And because of this, also the oil, which is the bittel from the place, also me'ein, it's similar, shniela, it's secondary, from the bittel was his faran in Eretz Yisrael, from the bittel that exists in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe will bring out now that this idea that the shemen of Regev is secondary to the oil of Tekoa is related to another matter in which Abba Shaul explains something that has been forgotten, and he came up. What is its use, as the Rebbe will explain now. That this that he says about the oil on the other side of the Jordan, as is Shenielo, that is second to it, is Alishitose. This goes by the same view. This goes up in the same line with another idea. Was Abba Shaul Zok Benegeya Shemen B'Mikdash, that Abba Shaul says as it relates to the oil in the Mikdash. The Mishnah Zokt in Masechta Midas. The Mishnah says in Masechta Midas, as a Zainin given vier Lishkes in the vier Mekzuos from Ezra's Noshim, that there were 4 rooms in the 4 corners of the women's section. Benegeya the Lishko Shebemarovis Dremis, as it relates to the room that was in the southwest of the Ezra's Noshim. Werd gebracht in der Mishnah, the Mishnah brings down, as Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov had gesagt, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov said, Shochachti ma hoyso mishameshes. I forgot what it served. What did they do? What did that serve? But Abba Shaul gesagt, so Abba Shaul said, Shom hoyu noisnim yayin v'shemen. They used to put their wine and oil. He hoyso nikras lishkas beis shmanim. It was called the room that houses the oils. Pavos hot Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov vergessen Davke wegen der Lishka Shebezras Noshim. Why did he specifically forget about the room of that one in the Ezras Noshim? He knew all the other three, but this fourth one he forgot. Is the Tata Mevair? So my father explains in Oisius from Kabbalah using the terminology of the Kabbalah as Odi Lishke mitzad atzme is verbunden mit amadrega bechinas yisoid zo, that room in of itself is tied to a level which is called the level of yisoid of zo, of zeid ampin level yisoid zo. In welches is shaykh der inyan hashikhe, in which it applies the idea of forgetting. Aber durch dem Vashom hoyu noisnim yayin v'shemen, by putting there in that lishka, which is a lishka that you can forget, and they put over there wine and oil. Unochmer, the Rebbe's father says even further. Not only they put their wine and oil, but it's called oil. The lishka nikras al shem shemen, the loyal shem yayin gamkin. It's not even called. They don't call it lishkas yayin v'shemen. They call it lishkas shemen. So by calling it shemen and storing it in shemen and calling it shemen, this took care. This they shouldn't forget what it serves. The Gemara says that the people they wouldn't forget is because they use olive oil. That brings back the memory. So in order not to forget, they placed over there the shemen, and they called it the shemen because shemen has the quality, shemen zayis, to protect from forgetting. Und davke abashol hotes der mont. And why was it specifically Abashol who reminded this? While the bechina from Abashol, the level of Abashol, the word Abba is referencing the level of Chochma. Avaim was Chochma bin Abba is Shol. Yisoid Abba should be Yisoid Zo. That's the element of Chochma within the element of Zo. Is verbunden mit Inyan HaZikorin. That is tied, Chochma is tied to Zikorin. Borum Zikorin, umibchinas Chochma Yisoid Abba, because Zikorin, quoting the Rebbe's father, that the memory comes from Chochma, which is Yisoid Abba. That's the explanation why he remembered it, because he is the level of Chochmah of Zoh. So the question is, the Rebbe asks, the Rebbe wants to point out, so why do we need wine over there? It should be just oil, because we're talking about the memory. Why do we have wine also included? Is l'chedin it so it's not understood in the inner way of thinking. Bal der oif to do is that inyan Hashem. Since the novelty here is the idea of the oil, it's the remembering. It's the oil that brings back the memory. Pavos is in the lishke given euch yain. So why was there also wine there? But you say to Mizu, it's not just that there was wine there. He mentions that there was wine and oil. Abashol der mon befedish yain. He says wine. First he says wine. He says yain vishemen. That is magdim. You say to Mizu more. Not only does he mention wine, he says it first that is magdim yain l'shemen. Then he says yain before oil. Shomoy noistim yain v'shemen. Wine and oil. So why was there wine there, or why does he mention wine? It's all about memory. It's supposed to be just shemen. Ubefrat, especially as yain is in yone hepech hazikon. Wine is opposite of memory. With the tat is mevaires, my father explains over there in Lekut Levi Yitzchok. Yain adra benimshach shikha, says from yain comes forgetting. So why is there yain and shemen when there's chayre? There should only be yain over there. Why is there yain and shemen? Oistes. The Rebbe explains The reason we need shemen because there is yayin there. We're trying to have the memory, the shemen, in a place where there is yayin, where there is forgetfulness, so that there should not be forgetfulness. Test is the bir bazaz adarabe here in sentence. Explanations on the contrary. That's actually the reason why there is yayin there, so we can have the shemen there. The roif to do, the novelty here is as the hamshocha v'zikorim, that you bring down the memory in them ordvu mitzad atzmai is dort shayich, in a place where on its own it's applicable. It's a place which brings down forgetting. We're bringing down memory in a place where there is forgetfulness. They would give wine, hadgosha, the lishke mitzad atzma is shayich, that the room on its own is applicable on ort von yayin. You can have wine there. Von welchen from which forgetfulness extends. Nor durch dem was mis dort neusen euch shemen. But by also putting oil where the wine is in an oven, to such an extent we put the oil that the oil overrides and becomes the main, as those ver der iker, that becomes the main. The lishka nikras al shem shemen. The lishka is called for the oil, that is called lishkas hashmani. That brings down the idea of memory, and that way you protect, you forewarn, not to forget what it was serving, that what it is, the shemen helps you to remind it. Und das ist euch Masse mit dem Bir Hanal von Taten. This fits the above explanation from my father, from Rabbi Levi Yitzchok, as Madreges Abba Shol is Yisoid Abba Shabi Yisoid Zo. It's not just Yisoid Abba, it's Abba which is Yisoid Zo. Yisoid Zo mitzad Atzmo. Yisoid Zo is Shaykh Kaviyachos, over there is, so to speak, say Shikha, forget it. Aber durch dem was der Hamshocha when you say the Abba be Yisoid Zo. But when you bring in the element of Abba in the Yisoid Zo, you also accomplish the memory also in the element of Zo. So now the Rebbe is going to connect these two Abba Shols. The Abba Shol that says that you put that lishka was used for wine and oil, to connect to the Abba Shol that we says that the regev was shniyalo in the oil. Based on this, we can explain as Abba Shol is ozil lishitose. Abba Shol goes according to his view in dem din von shniyalo regev shebe'ever hayardin. That secondary to the oil of tekoa is the oil that comes from the regev, which is the ever hayardin. Oich in dem din is der oiftu al derech zeh. Also in this halacha, the novelty is similar to the shemanim in the lishkar. As oich in dem ort ever hayardin, also in the place of ever hayardin, wo der bittel is beoifen, which the subjugation is in a way as is bittel hayesh, as bleibt over mitzias odom, but it still remains the entity of the person. That's the le'ar yardin. But nimshach the bittel from shemen canal, you also bring down the bittel of the oil over there. So you bring down within bittel b'mitz hayesh, the bittel of bittel mitzias. Bedugmas inyan hananal b'negeya zu lishkas space hashmanim. Similar to the idea of above with regards to the room in which they stored the oil, the house of the oil, as in them ordvu noistim yain, in the place where there's wine. Was mitzad atzma is dort shayich shikha. So then on their own it's shayich shikha. It's like Metzias, not bittel Metzias. There's an entity. Der Farbe dosis amadrege was shayich niv to nivroim. That's a level which is connected to created being Metzias v'chazayin and bali shinui, which are changeable. Forgetting, there's a forgetfulness. This is a nivroim. Ver dort nimshach der inyan hazikorin, and over there you bring down also in there the idea of the memory. Was kommt from Chochma Bittel, comes from Chochma Bittel is the Ever Hayarden bringing the oil in the higher Madrega. So these two things line up the idea of Abba Shol, that to put oil in a place of Yain, whereas forgetfulness lines up with the idea that the oil of Regev, which is a place of a Metzias, to bringing the Bittel, the Shemen, that also there should be the Bittel, the Metzias. Yud, the Romi calls Zayin Avodas Kol Echad V'Echad. So what's the lesson from this in the service of each one and one? As is Yidu as Torah vert angerufen sei Yayin und sei Shemen. Torah is called wine and oil. What is the wine? The chiluk b'chlal tzvishen zeyin avodas ha'odem is. What's the difference? The general difference between wine, serving Hashem like wine, or serving Hashem with oil, is yayin was bring to simcha. Yayin, which brings joy. When you drink wine, brings you joy. Is merom rames limud Torah mitakoch. That hints to learning Torah with a fervor. When Oiraisa Komeraschele, as quoting from the Gemara, it is the Torah that is burning in him. So that's the level of the fervor in Torah. Then you have the level of Shemen. That's Yain, level of Shemen. On the other hand, is Chashoyi, silence. Beist if der Bittel was fodert sich far bei Limud Torah. That represents the subjugation that is required before and during learning of the Torah. K'maymer Azal, as our sages of blessed memory say, as darf sein borchu b'Torah techila, that you need to have blessing in the Torah first. That's the level of bittul, techila. So you have to have the oil of Torah, but then you have the fervor, the understanding, the knowledge, the simcha of Torah. That's the learning. So one could think that these are two opposite matters. Yain is an inyan for Metzias. Yain is a matter of being an entity. Koch, that's fervor. And Shemen is inyan bittul. Shemen's idea is subjugation. And therefore, even though a person has to have these two movements, they cannot be together at the same time. Each one needs to be in a separate time. Before learning, before learning, you need to bench the Torah, you make a blessing for the Torah, bittul, so that you should hold by, my soul should be like dust to everybody. That's before learning. And then at the time that you're studying, which needs to be with understanding and grasping, the herzig blows the kochen geschmack. Over there, what you sense is only the fervor and the taste, the yain, the enjoyment from Torah, the wine of Torah. Learn Abba Shol. This is Abba Shol teaching us the lesson in der selber lishka, that you have to put oil in the same room. Fusis dot der yain, where there is yain. Und noch mehr. Der yain da werden atofel zum shemen. The oil needs to become secondary to the oil. The yayin needs to be, that's called Beis Hashmanim, it's mainly oil. Please, as the Lishka, and Al Shem Hashem and Davke, to the extent that the Lishka, the room is called on the name of specifically of Shemen. Es muss Tage sein, der Yayin, it needs to be wine. Also, der Kochin Avonas Vasogas HaTorah. The fervor, the intensity in understanding and grasping Torah. Aber man darf ständig gedenken. You need to constantly remember as euch der Koch, that also this fervor in Limudat Torah, of study of Torah, darf sein durchgenommen. It needs to be penetrated. It needs to be encompassed mit bittel zum Neusen HaTorah, with the subjugation to the one who gave the Torah. Even during your fervor, even during your understanding, you still have to have that sense of subjugation to Hashem, the one that gave the Torah. Und dabei waren die Mishnah, was ken kommen luleze. So now the Mishnah cautions us what could happen if we don't put them together. I forgot what it serves. It doesn't just say shachachti what was in there, what it served. What does it mean? The specific language. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov had gewusst as es is dort die Lishka. He knew that it was the room. Amokim Migdosh nor zu inyone beis hakodesh baruch hu ritzono. He knew that there was a room which was dedicated only to the house of Hashem and His will. That is for Hashem and His will. What did it serve? What purpose did it serve? Is lamai nafkamina? What difference does it make what it served? The known language is even if we were commanded to just chop wood, is dos in der selber lishke, so that's in that same room. And what is we need? We have no desire. We don't need to know what and when. We don't need to know what's different, how you serve the Eibishter. All what you need to serve the Eibishter is Kabbalah soil, Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. We just want to accept the yoke, love Hashem, and fear Hashem. How, what it manifests, Bechlal, on them diuk, without the specific funarop do in proti bechulu, to bring it down into details. That who cares what the avodah is? Forget that. And if it doesn't make a difference, so we forget, because what difference does it make? You're serving Hashem. Similar is in learning Torah. Learning Torah unasach bekamus veichus, to learn a lot of Torah, quantity-wise, quality-wise. Das is in yonei und sein chush. That is what you enjoy, that you have a feeling for that. Aber ma hoysa mishameshes. What purpose does your learning serve? What do you do with your learning? To go and conclude the learning, to make a halacha out of what you learned, that's not the root of his soul. I'm explaining, this is the idea when it says, Ma hoysel mishameshes, as far as serving Hashem, who cares what kind of mitzvah we do, as long as we do the Rotzen Hashem, Kabbalah Sil, Hashem, what difference does it make what the conclusion, the halacha? He enjoys the learning itself. If the person doesn't care about the halacha, it can evolve lamata mata, very low, boyfriend from the field in a way that it falls down. Zain chorif, aber onu masiklal, he can be sharp, but not being able to conclude at all. He's lacking in that level of being masik. So this was Zokt Abba Shol und der Mond. So Abba Shol says, and he reminds, as mendar faro bringen dem limud, you have to bring down the study in Maisa Proti Bepoil, in specific actions in actuality. General limud hamevili de maisa. It's a study that brings to action. When you all what you have is the wine of Torah, Ken Zain, it's possible a soll nicht wollen abtreten von dem Geschmack von Avona Vasog Torah. Could be that you will not want to step away from the taste, from the enjoyment, the sweetness of understanding and grasping Torah. Aufzuvernehmen sich mit Inyonim von Meise, in order to occupy yourself with matters of action. Was is oft verbunden mit Kfir. It is associated not just action, but forcing yourself. Maise meloshem ma'asim ala tzedakah, the word maise from the language that you force for tzedakah. That's the word ma'asin ala tzedakah. If you just have wine, if you just have the enjoyment, but then the limud ha-Torah is durchgenommen mit bittul. But when the study of Torah is penetrated with subjugation, and that Iker v'tachlis von sein Lernen is kidei soll wissen, and the main and goal of his learning is in order to know wie zu mekaven sein zum Ratzon Elyon, how to accurately come to the will of the Supreme. Davka demult is godel limud. Then his learning becomes great. Koilel hapirush gadlus halimud, which also includes godel talmud shemayvi lidei maisa. It becomes godel. That is gadlus halimud, the greatness of learning. The limud is an eifum for maybe the maisa. It's a study that brings to action. Bis zu vernehmen sich davke allein, to the extent that himself, he'll occupy himself mit inyonim shal maisa, with matters of action. The Gemara that zählt by Rucha for Rabbi Chaim, as the Gemara relates at length about Rabbi Chaim, davke geton begufe mamash, he did it, he went with his body, he went to capture the deers and skin the animals, and he didn't send it with his servants. He did the physical work himself. Messiah, and the Gemara says, how great the actions of Chiyah. So you see the quality and the importance of the Maisa. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Devarim Tofshin Mem Beis and Tofshin Lamed Vav.